Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube. I'm back to continue my read along for the Dark Shadows Daybook UnBound, written by Patrick McCrae. I'm still on Chapter 2. Episode 328. After sending Julia to turn Willie into a stiff, Barnabas gets a rise out of the sheriff with the help of a carefully placed ring. Julia Grayson Hall. Barnabas frets over Willie's potential recovery from being shot in the back 5 times. Because if anyone would have that kind of luck, and Julia insists that she's in no position to help kill the potential snitch, Barnabas prevails. And he lays a trap for the visiting sheriff to accidentally find Maggie's ring under a candle in Willie's room. All seems well when Barnabas learns that Willie is emerging from his coma despite or because of Julia's presence. Barnabas has never been more of the aristocratic everyman. And to the manor-born Joe Lunchbox than he is in 328. One of the show's funniest episodes up to this point. If he ever wrote a biography, it would share a name of mine, A Life Under Siege. And if you can't identify with that, well, I don't trust you. If you have any doubts that Dark Shadows is often an intentional comedy, just imagine this one with a laugh track. But even without it, Jonathan Frid and Grayson Hall are deftly playing setup punchline reverse with relish. No one has less authority than the one in charge, as Barnabas learns. It should be so simple. He's working with a doctor whose hands are getting dirtier by the episode. She has plenty to gain by killing Willie. And for Barnabas, it's the only thing to do. He's an 18th century dandy, and the home appliance called Loomis, is beyond the repair stage. Yeah. You can't even donate him to Goodwill. No, the Loomis must go, and it should be obvious. But every time he sends Julia out to do the wrong thing, she comes back with the news that his health is improving. It's a cacophony of counter institution. She claims he's under too much supervision. He responds that she's a doctor, and they kill people all the time, by accident, with plenty of supervision. She nags him into planting even more evidence against Willie. He goes along with it, but surprises her by insisting that Willie still needs to die, no matter the evidence. His insistence is not based entirely on fear of exposure. It's based on simple and human indecency. Why is he being questioned on something this simple? When will he be trusted instead of second-guessed? If he's going to take the rap, he might as well have the authority to prevent it. Otherwise, like a community theater director, he has all of the responsibility and none of the power in the repeated comic lesson their show teaches him and the audience with a stunning regularity. It will take the appearance of Angelique, a dream curse, and a Noel Harrison hairdo to turn him around. In that sense, Julia's hair is a good indicator of her stance on Barnabas. It's like the Cisco beard rule. Yes! Yes! If Cisco has a beard, it's a good episode of DS9. If Julia looks like she's modeling John Hurt's cough from I, Claudius, then the great man probably has a friend. But right now, she can endanger no one's life but Barnabas. And he's the boss. The episode, however, is a study in cosmic inevitability, proclaiming that Barnabas Collins is decidedly not the boss. In fact, not even Tony Danza. Of course, the art is in concealing the art, and Barnabas's terrible line readings when he's guiding the sheriff and Sam through. Willie's things make him a priceless popinjay. I said Barnabas's terrible lines readings, not Fred's. The more gullible that is Corey becomes, the more Barnabas channels the cosmic Eddie Haskell. Gee, a candlestick toppled. Look, there is a ring inside. However did Maggie's ring get there? Question mark. Oh no, I'm falling over. Oh, I'm falling over again. A-Dangerous Powers, OBE. He's loving how easily he led them straight to the evidence, and how little cleverness he had to exercise in doing so. Can we blame the regal rascal? If he can't get Loomis whacked, Barnabas can at least feel like a smarty pants about something. And it looks like the episode is going to end on a note of quiet triumph for our hero. But cosmic inevitability still has more in store. Of course, a deputy comes running back to ruin Barnabas's rebounding mood with the news that Willie is coming out of his coma. And why shouldn't he? He's with Julia, as always. The good doctor's Hippocratic oath extends to everyone but the guy who needs it most, Barnabas. If ever an episode of Dark Shadows needed to end with the theme from Curb Your Enthusiasm, this episode hit the airwaves September 27th, 1967. Episode 365. When Sarah begins appearing in David's bedroom, Vicky travels back to 1795 to straighten her hash out. Vicky Alexandra Moltke. To address Sarah's ubiquity, Barnabas reluctantly agrees to participate in a seance, of course. A blackout results in Vicky changing places with the original governess, Phyllis Wick, from 1795. This is precisely where Vicky finds herself. We are one episode away from 1795, which is when the future began. Dark Shadows is taking a television show on vacation for the first time since Lucy. If Ricky had jumped off the balcony excuse me, of the Tropicana Club, Ethel had tried Harpo Marx for witchcraft, and Fred Mertz had posed around the set in Nathan Forbes' first trousers. Don't claim you don't know what I'm talking about. Would I Love Lucy and the 1795 storyline be synonymous? My work is done. It's also a move more darling than the introduction of Barnabas himself. We are sampling the core of Dark Shadows. Everything else is watching Dan Curtis forge new alloys with the metal found in this mine. If this is the show's first ultimate trip, 365 is like watching the main characters pack. Of course, none but one is going, and they are all going in a certain sense. Curtis and his company are not just giving us a last glimpse before the trip, but he's also getting ready for the next spring and their return. The return from 1795 is a reboot for the show. Yes, it's Dark Shadows, but it knows it's Dark Shadows. It knows its bread and butter is Barnabas. And he's evolved into a hero, of course. Villains make the best heroes because they they have more choices in front of them, and thus a greater capacity for action. At this point, the producers make a point of having him soft pedal the evil in favor of seeing him reflect in 365 that this life is that not one that he chose. Gee, Barnabas, what do you mean? And cue time travel. It almost makes me wonder if Sarah's recent appearance was a cosmic preparation for the journey back, not to prepare the character so much as the audience. And why not a seance as the time machine? Dark Shadows never exactly ran on practicality here more than anywhere. It runs on metaphor. Here we see a mix of who the characters have been and who they'll become upon Vicky's return. Roger is fuzzy and particular, and yet he has a winning enthusiasm with the whimsy of a seance. Carolyn is merging debuttant sophistication with a more sober kind of confidence that she gains after being chosen by Barnabas. She will need that increasing sense of backbone to deal with Adam. Barnabas and Julia are still at each other's throats, but the impression of stalemate has never been stronger. Fate has them both by the short hairs, and they will eventually need each other there to survive. They are not friends. It will take threats like Angelique to forge that relationship, but the potential is finally there. Sarah is again the catalyst for the major action. It's appropriate that they exercise her with this. Indeed, after 1795, I don't recall her even being mentioned. It's as if the pipe to the afterlife is clogged up, and all it takes is a seance driven time trip to unplug it and let the kid through. Sarah is the quintessential little girl lost, and that figure is the driving metaphor of the show until Willie opens the coffin. Liz lost to guilt. Maggie lost to an alcoholic father on the wrong side of the lobster boat dock. Carolyn lost to being one of the only ones on the right side of the lobster boat dock, and Vicky completing the Lilith Fair lineup that inaugurated the show. So lost she just doesn't understand. It's a central theme to the show and the ultimate ambassador to lonely women at home, their prime demographic ultimately. It was a demographic that wanted a view of Jonathan Frid rather than a mirror. Why not burn it out completely by taking Vicky away in time as well as space? The Collins family rarely met a problem that couldn't be addressed via seance. And 365 runs with the notion so far and fast that it drops Vicky off in 1795. Maybe just because perhaps she just wants a friend. And this is the ultimately easier than consistently appearing as a ghost. We never see Sarah again because she only has one charge left in the battery, just enough to get Vicky back to 1968. How does she know to do this? It could be that her first act as a ghost was to send Vicky back home after the 1795 trip. Sarah's engineered time travel before just kind of backward. Few, if any, show discover themselves as this radically different than they were in their inception, but it is. For Dark Shadows, variety is the point. Where does Vicky go? Dark Shadows. From where has she come? Exactly. This episode hit the airwaves November 17th, 1967. And that's all well and good. But the fine points make about as much sense as an audiobook of Huckleberry Finn, audiobook read by Rosie Perez. I come to praise Dark Shadows, not to bury it. However, it might get a little bit dirt on its shoes, but I promise it'll come right off by the end of the essay. I'm going to ask you a very straight question. How does the whole time travel seance thing really work? And why? Because, well, it's easy to say because Dan Curtis wanted it to happen. I think we can probably do better than that. The science behind the 1795 chronoportation is so non-existent that it makes the parallel time room look like something even Richard Dawkins could love. And this always bothered me. Fast and loose. Thy name is the Dark Shadows writing staff. When it comes to certain aspects of temporal mechanics, at least 1897 and 1995 have external tools and locations that we can point to, but 1795 is unhampered by the curse of casualty. I'll stop right there and answer Patrick's question in my own way, and then I'm going to continue reading. When you go back, and again, I know they said, the producers have always said they didn't plan to go back to 1795, and I would never call them liars, and I'm not. But from my perspective as a fan, when I first watched Dark Shadows, and I've told you guys this, I didn't know what Dark Shadows was or was about when I first watched it. And when Vicky, back toward the beginning, there's a seance in Collinwood to call upon the ghost of Josette. And I know I'm going way back. Vicky says prior to the seance she feels something's going to happen to her. Now, the ghost of Josette does possess her and she ends up speaking French. But I'm thinking, if that's not really to me, that wasn't really a big deal. Like, a ghost possessing you, you always sort of got the sense that could happen, even before it happened. So I always wondered at that moment, well, what was Vicky meaning? She felt something might happen to her. So I always got the sense, even in the beginning, that Vicky was going to travel somewhere other than Bangor, Maine, and other than... I didn't know she was going to travel back in time, keep in mind. But, and another way to answer this question is this. How does it work? Does Sarah pull her back? I think that in many ways, because also too, there's an episode prior to the seance, a couple episodes prior to the seance, where Julia Hoffman hears is in the mausoleum, and she hears a woman weeping, and then she hears a wicked woman laughing. Well, this is now it's not Laura Parker, but the laugh is Angelique. In my view, I think it's 363. I think is the episode, if I'm not mistaken. Um, for me, how it happens is the ghost of Sarah, yes, pulls her back because, and I'm not trying to give a fancy answer here. They're using. I'm giving many answers. I apologize. Yes, the ghost of Sarah pulls Vicky back. Why Vicky? Many reasons. I mean, from a writing standpoint, who's been your protagonist? Who's been your go-to protagonist? Victoria Winters. Whether she says I don't understand or not, she has been the one you turn to. She's faced ghosts. She's gone up against the Phoenix. This is it. This is your protagonist. And really, what the show is really doing, and I'm going to use a wrestling term, they're using one protagonist to get another protagonist over. They're taking Victoria Winters, and they're going to have Barnabas in 1795 defend this girl without knowing her. Keep in mind, in 1795, Barnabas Collins, he doesn't know Victoria Winters, but he still defends her. So they're using Vicky to get Barnabas over as your hero, even after being turned into a vampire. What does Barnabas say to his dad? Use your prestige to get the girl's name cleared. He doesn't have to say any of that. And I think, so for me, Sarah pulls Vicky back for Vicky to see what exactly happened. Now, did Sarah pull Vicky back to find out the secret of Barnabas? I think that's the question really that needs asked and answered. And here's what I'll say. I think to a degree, yes. But a ghost cannot foresee certain events happening. Sarah's not a mind. She's not psychic. And you're pulling someone back to your time when you were alive. So once you do that, you can't really help them because the living Sarah isn't going to know why Vicky's there. The Sarah who died would. Sarah's not dead in 1795. She doesn't die till later. So I know that's a roundabout way of answering it, so I apologize for giving my answer mid-read. I'm going to continue now. While putting the finishing touches on this book, I rewatched episode 364, where Sarah visits Barnabas, and I saw things in it that were completely fresh and new. There is enough in that episode to fill an entire Daybook collection. He exaggerated. Okay, that might be going a bit far, but I had a profound reaction to what I saw, bottom line. I continue to see Sarah as one of the most intriguing characters on the series. We only underestimate her because she appears to be a child, and she seems to behave like one in many ways. But she has an agenda and can be impressively stern when executing it. Whenever I encounter one of the thorny questions posed by the series, episode 364 usually alludes to an answer. And given that it takes place just prior to the time travel seance, I don't find that to be a coincidence. I always had the suspicion that Sarah was responsible for the temporal displacement experienced by Vicky. But that was largely, because I said so. I seemed neat and tidy, but I couldn't really explain why. It also made sense. Now I think I can. When Sarah appears to David, she says that the dead are angry and hints that the result may not be a Whitman's sampler of love. My immediate thought was that she's talking about Quentin and Judah Zachary. And that very well could be, but what ghost? We have not seen the ghost of Josette for quite a while, and we won't see the ghost of Quentin for about 2 years. So what is she talking about? Well, don't tell her I said this, but the only angry ghost I see around here is Sarah herself. So what if that's the case? Why is she angry? Well, she died in powerless agony, which doesn't sound like fun. Her ghost then watched her beloved brother turn into the worst version of himself. Oh, she also got to watch her mother commit suicide. So I suspect she's in a pretty bad mood. Barnabas gets a second chance at life, and somehow he's even nastier than he was when Joshua chained him up. So I guess that online test was wrong, and he's not an introvert after all. Newsflash, you probably are not an introvert either, but it takes less time to say introvert rather than say literally doing nothing is preferable to spending time with you. And I need to wrap myself up in as much passive-aggressive self-righteous as possible, as I basically claim to have a doctor's excuse for avoiding. Oh, shit. As it turns out, I guess being buried alive under the mocking, parallelistic image of the God who abandoned you does not mellow a guy out the way everyone hoped. Well, there went those 172 years, so the ghost of Sarah, sustained for nearly 2 centuries by the comforting notion that her brother was one of the undead and might again be her friend and companion, is an understandable snit. But that's not all. If you can, in the next 10 minutes, or if you call in the next 10 minutes, you'll also get a complimentary realization that the evil sorceress responsible for your death, his curse, your mother's suicide, and I suspect the dark ritual that reanimated the talking hand haunting 40 years worth of hamburger help rats is about to show up as Roger's new wife. Yeah, Angelique is on her way, and will most likely bring her Thomas Kincaid collection with her. It's a nightmare. This has to be stopped. What better way than to take the girl Barnabas is crushing on, drag her back in time, give her an e-ticket tour through Barnabas becoming a vampire, and top it off with her being framed for the crimes committed by the woman she will soon have to call boss. Sarah Collins needs a flaming sword of justice, and it's about time that Vicky not only understood something, but everything. 1968. I think I'm on chapter 3. Chapter 2. So I'm going to start chapter 3. 1968. The Road of Trials. Trust. Night has fallen over the great house of Collinwood. So, are you ready? So Uh, so you already read about 1795, and that's plenty between the prior episode and the one coming up. Vicky came and went from 1795. We now rejoin our 20th century, already in progress. Episode 469. Julia and Lane square off when she learns that he may not only have the cure for Barnabas, but his loyalty as well. Julia, Grayson Hall, Jeff, Julia, and Vicky open the coffin in the secret room after Jeff reveals that he somehow knew the latch was there. The coffin is empty. In the hospital, Barnabas was excruciating blood pain, has excruciating blood pains, and Lane explains that he may have a permanent cure. Later, Julia visits Lane, who brags that he can cure for Barnabas far better care for Barnabas far better than she. As she leaves, Julia passes Jeff Clark. Lane is furious that he is being associated with Clark. Jeff explains that he saw Julia at Eagle Hill. Lane says the bodies there are far too old for his purposes. It's clear Jeff is being blackmailed to work for him. With more than a week of revolutionary plot advancement under the show's belt, the staff now settles back into a standard pace. In an interview with Violet Wells, I read that she, Sam Hall, and Gordon Russell would plot out the show months in advance, finally getting down to week by week, episode by episode, and scene by scene. The process was surprisingly meticulous. Meticulous. I think the formula breaks down a bit like this: 10% last scene of the prior episode, 30% covering prior plot points, 10% review and advanced secondary plot, 30% revelation of one new plot point in prime storyline, 10% foreshadowing future plot point, 5% debate about prior decision or confession, 5% major new decision or confession. In this case, we spend a lot of time in the mausoleum as Vicky and Jeff sort of remember segments of 1795. The major new ground we cover is that Jeff is going to graveyards for Dr. Lane, and that the bodies in Eagle Hill are too old for the job. Hint, hint. The discoveries, of course, are that the coffin is empty. Hint, inside the secret room, and that Lane may be able to permanently prevent Barnabas from having any relapses. But is that a revelation? No. Lane never said that Barnabas is permanently cured. This is the trick that Dark Shadows does. It does reliably deliver new information. Instead, it reiterates old information with slightly more context. The characters sometimes act like it's the first time they've heard things. But in the case of Barnabas and his blood pains, he has no reason to be surprised. Barnabas may have seen the recent episodes, but not all viewers have. And for more seasoned viewers, the show still entertains by covering old ground in new enough circumstances that it feels like the first time, usually. The hot scene in this one is the conversation that Julia has with Lane. This may be Julia's real turning point. Up to this moment, Barnabas has been a thorn in her side, and that she's niggled about to their mutual machoism. She's poisoned him, blackmailed him. Lane senses this. He reveals in pointing out the legitimate truth that he can care for Barnabas better than Julia. After all, he cured him in less than a day. It feels like two pimps arguing over an employee. They both pretend to have his best interest at heart. They both pretend to be not to be, engaged in vicious combat. One pretends not to be weaker. One pretends not to be gloating over it. Technicality. This was a cue for Big Papa Dan to stride onto the set, slam down his chalice, and settle things by reminding everyone that Jonathan Frid, that Shakespearean drizzle of sweet Canadian maple, was and forever would be his foxiest earner. Julia loved Barnabas, but she's not exactly lost him. He was close enough for her to bully, torture, and be tortured by. He was a problem, yes, but he was all hers. She contemplates losing him to someone who can pull off what she claims she only might be able to do. Not only but someone who offers none of the minutiae of romantic jealousy. She's suddenly behind an 8 ball the size of Collingwood. If she gets out from behind it, her relationship with Barnabas will never be the same. She'll have to tap into her humanity, not her guile. They might even wind up equals. On this day in 2063, Dr. Zephyr Cochrane and the town of Bozeman, Montana, will welcome the Vulcan's Surveyor T. Plena Hath on what will be appreciated as First Contact Day. This episode hit the airwaves April 10th, 1968. To get into the Angelique/Barnabas relationship requires two things. You have to imagine them getting along, and it's not difficult. If you can imagine them getting along, we are home free. The only thing you need to contend with is the fact that these are murderers. Many times over, it helps that neither of them is entirely human when they make most of their literal decisions, as Christopher Lloyd says in Buckaroo Bonanza. It's not my goddamn planet, monkey boys. Indeed, and humans are no longer their people. They exist beyond time. They exist beyond the need for normal nourishment. As one of the living dead, Barnabas has a set of priorities that may overlap with his former instincts. But his moral compass about his new food source is completely different. I think it's the cognitive dissonance that humans have when they continue to eat meat, even when they realize that steak had a mother. Also, we have no idea what Angelique really is. I know that Barnabas asserts that she's not even human in 1840. I'm not saying we wouldn't mourn the lives they took or hold them accountable, but they see humans entirely different than we do ourselves. We are built to die. They are not. They are built to have an influence that will last for centuries, if not more. We are not, so to them, it's no big deal. If they shave off a few decades from our lives, we probably weren't going to do much with them anyway. Episode 473. When Roger takes a wife and Angelique takes her place at Collinwood, while take take extreme measures or a one-way ticket to Wincliffe. Cassandra Collins, Laura Parker. Roger enters with his new wife in tow, a dead ringer for Angelique named Cassandra. Brittle conversations ensue as Roger and Liz fume at one another, and Cassandra pretends to have no idea who Barnabas is. The episode ends with Cassandra alone, tintillating a familiar laugh. I think everyone has at least one Angelique. As she returns for the first time in 473, we get the feeling why. That's a tribute to the script by Sam Hall and everything else by Laura Parker. Barnabas has been dreading it, but even with the bizarre stuff he's seen in Martinique, 1795, and the 60s, I don't think he believes she will reappear. As he opines that witches never die, etc., I think he's doing it so that he can turn around and say, well, guess I was wrong. Ding dong, and all that. It's hard not to impose inner monologues while watching the show. Perhaps Angelique is a living Rorschach blot of a character, drawing out the true intentions from everyone she meets. Wonder Woman needs a lasso. Angelique just needs a judgy little laugh. Whether it's just violence, respect, or jealousy, the veils come off others in her presence. And that's such a refreshing thing on the show. Everyone else is dedicated to keeping and or inducing secrets. Yes, she's awfully evil, but she's evil in the name of love. And we all have impulses to go there once or twice in our lives. And each audience member secretly knows that as long as they weren't in her way and kept up some lively chat, they'd be spared. Right? It's her ultimately romantic intent that redeems her. Do any of us really dread that she's back? No. Finally, a woman at Collinwood who knows the score. Heck, just anyone at Collinwood who knows the score. She's what we've been waiting for since Jason McGuire. An agent of action, change, humor, awareness, and love. I just imagine alone with Angelique for the first time in 473, Barnabas sitting down with her and catching up on how crazy it's all been before remembering she's a monster he's obligated to hate. Laura Parker really must be given ample credit for this effect. The good stuff, not the monster part. Holding multiple college degrees, beauty rarely seen this side of the livery, and a balance of genteel southern refinement and canning. Metropolitan wisdom, Parker enlivens the wickedest dialogue with equal parts pathos and play with unerring instincts. Her arrival signals the last major tonal shift we've been awaiting in the show. And you see it here first. Up to now, it's a story about 1960s mortals interacting with gods, which end with Angelique joining Barnabas to form the dysfunctional time trekking immortal first couple of Collinwood. The situation is now reversed. The story of Dark Shadows is finally one of God's, weaving through fields of mortals. That's an important factor to consider when passing moral judgment on Barnabas and Angelique. They may have imposed impossible crimes, but they also have impossible spans of time to pay impossible prices. Us short timers. This episode hit the airwaves on April 17th, 1968. I hope you can tell that I have a real axe to grind with people who complain about the acting on the show. These are the sorts of critics who confuse Dark Shadow's limited production values with the performances. Don't make that mistake. How are you supposed to act that stuff? There is no sense memorable exercise for anything the show has to offer, even if there David is a memorable feast for all five. Alright guys, I'm going to stop right there and pick up tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed this read along. I'm sorry, I don't think this is too short. 46 minutes. Alright guys, I'm going to stop there for right now for tonight. I'll see you guys tomorrow for some more read along for the Dark Shadows Daybook UnBound. It is really, really, really good. Really well written. I'm enjoying it. So far, my favorite thing, I love how, obviously I'm a huge not just a Dark Shadows fan, but Deep Space Nine fan, so I love the Deep Space Nine reference of Cisco. And I love the 1795 stuff. I like the fact that, I really do need to do another video about Phyllis Wick, primarily about her. But I love how, Sarah is the one who pulled Vicky back. I agree with that totally. I mean, look, who else other than Vicky? I mean, you aren't going to pull Carolyn back. Pull the woman back Barnabas cares about. Vicky. Alright, guys. Link to where you can go get the Dark Shadows Daybook, which, by the way, the Dark Shadows Daybook UnBound is only 99 cents on Amazon for your Kindle. I'm reading this on my computer, by the way, so you can't, and it doesn't take up a bunch of memory or anything. Now, my advice, when you go buy this, is when you're reading, bookmark it, so you can pick right back up where you left off. I didn't do that the first time, and I kept going back to the beginning. Not that I minded, but still. A little admission. Make sure you mark where you last read. Or even on your Kindle. Or your computer, in my case. Alright, guys and gals. I hope you enjoy this video and have a great, great night. Bye-bye.